Proud because often, more times than not, I get ridiculed for being who I am. And I'm gonna be proud. Today is our Pride Festival, and yes, our content centered around that. You don't have to announce you're leaving either.
Look at Pete trying to show off his
Hi, Petey.
yeah,
You like that fan?
he loves it.
So we're gonna be proud and loud. We're gonna take up space.
Yes,
That
we
makes you
are.
feel uncomfortable. Like I said, no need to announce you're leaving. Just leave, please.
Don't do
Because
it, Luke.
obviously you're not gonna have a good time.
Yep. Clint likes it when they take up a lot of space, of course. That is Clint's girlfriend.
Oh, no.
Welcome back. Beautiful and amazing human beings. My name is Luke Gradowski here of thebestpoliticalshow.com, and we are going to be going live for the next 2 hours discussing all the latest and craziest news developing right now. As, of course, there's never a shortage of things to discuss, as it looks like Ukraine just invaded Russia, as Iran at any moment and time could start their retaliation, as Taylor Swift just had to cancel her tour for some very interesting security reasons, as Kamala Harris and her VP pick are openly declaring that they love socialism, as the United Kingdom is up in flames, and there's some crazy allegations coming from a prison in the Middle East. What's going on there? Well, that's exactly what we are going to be discussing for the next 2 hours, as we would ask you guys to please share this broadcast with your friends and family members. It means a lot to us when you do. And you can also participate in the conversation, and one quick and easy way to do that is to simply sign up to lukeunfiltered.com. When you do that, you get access to a lot of really cool things, and one of the things that you get access to is a Telegram chat that I am in right now, and we will be going to callers in about an hour and a half from now. We always prioritize new callers, so if you want to call in and haven't called in yet, all you have to do is sign up on lukeunfiltered.com. Click the link down in the description below. Signing up, it's quick, it's easy, it's simple. We email back you a login. You log in, get it into the Telegram chat, and let us know you want to call in, and we will be going to you in about 30 minutes. We, of course, will be reading all super chats as well, but we prefer you guys use mysuperchat.com, also linked in the description, as it allows your super chats to actually show up on screen and only charges us a 3% service charge. As, of course, there's a lot to discuss. We're going to try to get into all of it with Ryan Kennel. Ryan, for the people who don't know you, who are you and how would you introduce yourself?
Well, thanks for having me on. First of all, it's awesome to be here. But yeah, I'm Ryan Kennel. I spent 11 years in the United States Navy, and I thought I was going to be operating on nuclear reactors for the rest of my life. And then I started a YouTube channel and decided to do that instead, where I talk about entertainment, pop culture, kind of how identity politics is infesting every aspect of that, which is then trying to change the way we interact as a society and as a culture. And I talk about sports and a little bit of political stuff as well. So happy to be here.
You went from real wars to the culture war, which is probably a lot more intense now than it ever has been.
Well, listen, I'm not trying to put my name in the hat for VP or anything. I'm not going to lie about my military service. I never got deployed. I'm not going to pretend like I was anything other than exactly what it was. So
We'll talk about that as well. As, of course, part of the meme war is Clint and all of his girlfriends. That last one was a winner.
It's better than being gay. You know what I mean? So
He's both.
I don't know. I'm a little bit of both. I got to find a way to get out of that car. That's a terrible car to be a part of. Anyways, at Liberty Lock Pod on X, if you want to support my work, subscribe there. I'll follow you back. Liberty Lockdown is the show. Got a new episode dropping tonight. I was just on with Dave Smith yesterday. Part of the problem. If you haven't watched that, do that. The camera is now blinking. And I also do Tower Gang. Don't ever watch that.
It's winking.
Speaking of, Tower Gang was last night.
It was, and it was definitely racist.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ian Crossland. I agree with you about being in that car with those people at the beginning. I feel like it's contagion. Like you don't need to be next to someone to get the same illness as them. You can,
100%.
Your body can start to mimic their own illness.
I literally just watching that video, and I was already questioning my gender.
Oh, that was brutal. I'm so glad I wasn't in that car with those people, but I kind of was.
But that's you every day, though.
Fair point, Luke. Fair point.
Well, if you haven't caught my stuff, check it out at Ian Crossland. It's all over the internet. You'll find it. You'll love it. Let's just move it along. Steph, talk to me.
Hi, everybody. This is Steph. We are Change. I am the official button pusher of this show, and you can find me on X at StephWRC.
Steph, your hair looks beautiful today.
Oh, thank you, Clint.
I'm just counterbalancing the insults I threw yesterday. So.
Yeah, well, when you say it like that, it kind of negatives it out.
No, I know, but I'm trying to negate yesterday with a compliment today. But your hair actually does look nice today. Your hair looked terrible yesterday, so I'm doing both.
He's being honest. It's
Talking
basically
about scratching in a wound while it's healing.
All right, guys, it's fine because there's so much more important stuff than my hair.
You're putting yourself in a worse off situation, just like the Ukrainian military right now.
That's how you do a transition, ladies and gentlemen.
That just invaded Russia. As of course, we have a lot of crazy news happening from this larger proxy war between Russia and the United States, as it looks like allegedly the Americans were caught off guard. If you are buying the official story of what's going on here, as it looks like the Ukrainians launched 1,000+ man incursion into the Russian Kursk region, which is near Belarus, which is north of Kiev, and it looks like they are still currently occupying some Russian territory. As of course, this is a clear red line for Vladimir Putin, who said that he would protect his territory at all costs, with even the possibility of using potential nuclear weapons in order to do so. This is a pretty big story, as of course this is a surprise, allegedly, to the Americans. I don't know if I buy that specific kind of story that the mainstream media is trying to tell us, as of course the United States is playing a very key, crucial role in all of this, and this is a major offensive. This is a major move. Conflicting reports are coming out about the casualties, how many people are injured, if this was successful, if this was not. But the reports that we're getting are showing a pretty major, serious, bold move made by the Ukrainians, which of course is pissing off the Russians, as there's also some reports that haven't been confirmed that the Ukrainian armed forces are also controlling the gas metering station in Russia that is responsible for 50% of all Russian gas exports into Europe. Now, again, this hasn't been confirmed, but the region that the Ukrainians are invading in Russia looks like it is the region where this key major infrastructure for the Russians is also located. This is a pretty big deal, as of course this will spur on the Russians to retaliate. And again, I don't know what you guys think, but I'm not buying that the Americans were caught off guard here, as of course they're playing a crucial role in this. Do you think that is plausible in any way, shape, or form?
You know, it's hard to believe anything that we have, especially in the first couple of days, something happens with this Russia-Ukraine conflict that's been going on for, 2 or 3 years at this point, because it feels like there ends up being misinformation at first, and then we kind of finally get what's really happening. In terms of, do I think Ukraine could have done this without consent or without American knowledge? Potentially. I think if you're Ukraine and you're sitting there, you're looking at all this funding that's come from the United States, you are desperate to keep that going. And with what may happen in November, they might be looking at this, the idea of a Trump-Vance presidency, maybe not the best thing for their continued support. Although I think we all believe the Republicans, baseline Republicans, are still going to want to support Ukraine in general. But there's going to be a higher likelihood of people wanting to disengage with that. And if you get involved now, if you force America's hand, I think they want to get American troops, boots on the ground, actively in Ukraine, fighting against Russians.
They've wanted that for a long time.
Exactly. And if you do that now, you buy in the next president to force to be dealing with that, which is much different than where we are now. So I totally believe Ukraine would do this without American authorization.
I mean, this is why I'm so opposed to the current leadership in Ukraine, is because the corruption has been so transparent. They already tried to blame Russia for attacking Poland when in fact it was a Ukrainian missile. They have already started, they have attempted to start World War III multiple times and get my countrymen put into the firing line. And yes, I realize that the American government is also largely responsible for this conflict. But when it comes to these escalations, I think it's a distinct possibility, given that the funding is running dry and Trump is signaling, I hope he's telling the truth, that he is going to end this war. I think very much the Ukrainian government, who's enjoyed this gravy train of government largesse from the American taxpayer, would love for that to continue. And the best way to do so is, as he said, get American boots on the ground, because it's going to be really hard to get out of that once they're there.
Yeah, I mean, the escalations are there, and they probably are kind of there mainly because of this upcoming U.S. election that is playing a key role in this. And I made this argument a few weeks ago that geopolitically, we are going to see a lot of crazy stuff happen right now, as of course, Biden's not there. There might be a huge shift. And if you're Russia, China, or even Ukraine, or even, let's just say, Iran, or even another country in the Middle East, if it's time to ever make a move to take advantage of a failed leadership in Washington, D.C., it is now. As of course, American F-16s were seen just flying over Ukraine a couple days ago. A couple weeks ago, there was arguments about the U.S. government allowing the Ukrainians to bomb Russian territory with American-made advanced missiles. And Joe Biden, under the kind of his presidential leadership, said, yeah, we'll allow it. As of course, that's yet another major escalation, as what we're hearing from right now is that Putin has declared that this is a major line that has been crossed. He is trying to evacuate his citizens from that region. He is deploying a lot of his other kind of military resources to that region that hasn't previously seen fighting and conflict in it. As of course, this is predominantly in the kind of northern territory near Belarus, as a lot of the fighting has been happening pretty much in the east of that country. And in the east of that country, you see essentially stalemates, but stalemates where the Russians slowly are making kind of progress when it comes to their kind of conquest of territory. Their strategy here, in my opinion, is to try to take out as many Ukrainian troops as possible, try to deplete all of their resources, and the West is just importing as much as they can into it. But this is a make or break moment for Ukraine, and to me, this kind of signals a larger desperate move that sadly is going to see a lot of these Ukrainian men kind of sacrificed even more than before, because now they're in enemy territory. Now they're in Russian territory. Now they're going to be, of course, dealing with more significant military kind of pressures that the Russians are going to escalate now more significantly.
And just to add to Luke's point there, you know, Putin has said many times that they've crossed the line. This is another real major line cross. If this is accurate and they've actually land invaded Russia proper, there's a distinct possibility that they will use a low-yield nuclear weapon. I'm not saying it's probable, but I'm saying it is definitely possible. Putin has threatened this many times, that if the Russian nation proper gets invaded, bombed, anything like that, that they will basically anything in their arsenal is a potentiality. So let's all pray that either these reports are wrong or that Putin once again demonstrates the level of caution that he has so far. I don't know. It's nerve-wracking.
It definitely makes that possibility more likely when you see things like this. And I do think it also could, this is, I think, a big risky move for Ukraine in general, because at this point in time, we've seen them for the past several years say the same thing. Hey, we were just sitting here, we were invaded, blah, blah, blah. You can have a little bit of sympathy from that and get that from the general public when that's the narrative that's out there. But now when you actually start an incursion into Russian territory, that very much changes things and potentially the perception of Ukraine from around the world. At the end of the day, all of this stems back to, I talked about it 3 years ago or whatever, when Ukraine's cozying up to NATO and Putin says, hey, I've already got NATO nations on my border. We didn't think this was going to be the deal when we ended the Cold War. Now I literally, potentially, Ukraine could become an official part of NATO. That's the line, and I'm going to put a stop to that. And he did. You know, after years and years of warning about NATO encroaching ever closer to Russian territory. I mean, how would we feel, I suppose, if there was this big alliance that was formed in South America and all of a sudden Mexico joined that alliance and they're right there on our border?
Just a reminder that this is not secret either. This was William Burns, the current head of the CIA that was the former ambassador to Russia, who emailed, or it was a cable, which is just like a confidential email, to Condoleezza Rice. I think it was 2010. So this was known for 12 years before the invasion, and it was called the Niet Means Niet memo, where he's saying, if you do this, we will have to invade, and we don't want to. So the U.S. State Department knew explicitly this was the reddest of red lines, and they pushed it anyways. So they wanted this war. I've been saying that the same as you for 2+ years, ever since it started. It's unbelievable that narrative still hasn't gotten out to the American public more broadly to know that this was actually catalyzed. And then you have the Maidan Revolution, you have Victoria Nuland, you have the State Department that's funding NGOs to ultimately foment that revolution too. I mean, this is all stuff that the American government and the American people would never permit when it comes to nations on our borders. But we do the exact same thing to Russia, and then we go, look how terrible these people are. They're doing exactly what America would have done. Exactly.
Yeah, we never voted for any of these policies either. We
No.
never went to
We were
Congress
never even
and
told
said,
about it.
hey, we're going to have a proxy war. We're going to flip the government here in Ukraine to be more favorable towards us. A lot of this was done undemocratically, as of course there still haven't been elections held in Ukraine as well. I have the Ukrainian live war map kind of pulled up here, and as you guys could see, the majority of the fighting has shifted to this specific region just right under Sumy, right in Russian territory, where there is a lot of heavy fighting right now. And that has stopped a lot of the fighting happening on the east southern coast, where most of the fighting has been going on. And I think the Ukrainian strategy here was to try to divert the kind of progress that the Russians were having on the east and trying to divert them to the north. But again, Russia has a lot more military resources, a lot more military troops, a lot more individuals that they're able to send to all of these specific regions. And it definitely does look like this was kind of a desperate attempt from the Ukrainians that are going to be losing a significant amount of people in this conflict. As of course, the army that usually is invading usually faces the most amount of adversity, the most amount of problems, the most amount of casualties. And those 1,000+ soldiers are probably going to have a very difficult time kind of staying in that very specific region that they have took over right now.
Well, one more point that I forgot to make is that the cables that I just described from William Burns, the ambassador to Russia back then, the only reason we know about that is because of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So if you're wondering why he was accused of all the nonsense that he was accused of and basically was tortured in Belmarsh prison for years and years, look no further. He disclosed exactly the relationship that the United States State Department had with these foreign governments that they were essentially trying to undermine and maybe even overthrow. That is a level of breach of statecraft that the State Department and the CIA doesn't want to allow. So that's my opinion as to why he was brutalized the way he was.
Like the silver lining of some of these conflicts that are going on around the world and so many people looking at these things and the chaos of the world's evolving into is I feel like more and more people, maybe now more than ever before that I can remember, are saying, you know what? Maybe we should just worry about American problems. Let's let Europe worry about Europe problems. Let's let the Middle East worry about Middle East problems and stop spending our time, money, energy, and then sometimes American blood on these efforts. Yeah. And when it comes to this whole thing with Ukraine and Russia, 3 or 4 years ago, most people's perception of Ukraine was, oh, that's the second most corrupt country in the world right next to Russia, right? And all of a sudden that shift and they're supposed to be our greatest ally. We need to bend over and do all these things for them. And
It's just a lie.
And I think for most people, they're starting to kind of grow tired of this entire narrative and conflict that we desperately owe it to the Ukrainian people to get involved. I have sympathy for any normal people that are caught up and drawn up in this. It's awful. I couldn't imagine what it would be like if there were mortar attacks or rockets coming down in my neighborhood, and I'd probably be desperately asking for help too. But there at some point. I feel like most people are going to say enough is enough.
But keep in mind, though, that the first mortar attacks that came from the government of Ukraine against the Ukrainian people. That started in 2015. So they've been living in a war zone long before Russia invaded. A lot of people don't talk about that part.
In 2014, it was the Donbass region where there was internal kind of fighting from the eastern territories, the Donbass region specifically, against the kind of Ukrainian Kiev forces that were, battling and fighting each other on the ground since 2014. A lot of people believe that this war started just a few years ago. No, it started 2014, and the conflict is just slowly expanding and growing with more countries being involved here. France literally has active soldiers on the ground inside of Ukraine. There's a lot of mercenaries. There's a lot of American advisors. There's a lot of intelligence agencies from America, specifically from the Western world, in Ukraine right now. There's also the Foreign Legion that has Americans fighting a part of it, and it's one of the fiercest kind of fighting units for the Ukrainians, along with the cracking unit that is known for having some of the most kind of advanced military hardware, drone jamming kind of technology as well, and sophisticated hardware that is making a big difference in this kind of larger conflict as well.
And since I think it was 2017 or 18, that was like right around the time that John McCain and Lindsey Graham and all these other scumbags were over there, basically encouraging. They were saying next year is the year we take it to Russia. They were saying this 3 years before, Russia actually invaded. but I think it was the New York Times that reported on this, that there was, in fact, training exercises that were being done by, like, I don't know if it was Black Ops or it was American soldiers that were training up the Ukrainian military on the capacity to be able to defend themselves or perhaps even attack Russia. So this did not come out of the blue. Like, the people, they want to paint it as if, like, oh, just one day Putin woke up and he decided to invade and no one saw it coming. It's like, no, they knew 100%. And it was Kamala Harris, in fact, who just a few months prior to Putin ultimately deciding he was going to invade, she came out and she said the door remains open for Ukraine to be added into NATO. And that was, I think, in my opinion, that was the final straw. He was like, okay, we're moving now.
Yeah, I agree with your point, Ryan. I think there's sympathy there for the Ukrainian people, but I think the longer this goes on, the more the American people are asking, why is this continuing? Like, there's a lot of other things that we have to worry about here domestically that are a lot more important for the Americans that, of course, we should be prioritizing, but we're, again, acting like the world police, as, of course, we're involved in the proxy conflict in Europe, and we're also involved in the proxy conflict inside of the Middle East right now, as we got more news coming from now UK airline operators that are being advised not to fly into Beirut airport. Now, we talked about a similar story from the United States with Delta canceling some of their flights to Jerusalem, and this is highlighting that the Middle East still is on edge. They're still waiting for potential retaliation from Iran, as we're getting news today that the Iranians are furious that other Arab nations are, quote, standing idly by and not wanting to participate in this larger powder keg kind of situation that the Middle East is in right now, as they are going to other Arab nations and trying to work out deals about the space in the airspace specifically, about where their missiles are going to be going, what support they're going to be getting, if they're going to have airspace that's going to be closed or open. And now we're hearing reports that the Iranians are not getting their way and they're just essentially declaring, screw it, we will attack this country in the Middle East on our own. And it probably won't be just by themselves, as, of course, the Iranians finance a lot of proxy groups. They finance Hezbollah. They finance the Houthi rebels inside of Yemen. And to me, this is going to be potentially something a lot bigger than just a symbolic gesture that happened on April 13th of this year, where they kind of launched drones and had the United States and Israel kind of shoot them down. So
it was just yesterday we talked about how the UAE said that they weren't allowed to use their airspace. And this is actually a big part of the reason that Trump is so favored by so many Israelis, is that through the Abraham Accords, he was essentially buying off all of these Arab nations to be more friendly with Israel and to be more to put a divide between them and Iran. And I think it worked. And I think that's what you're seeing is Iran's very frustrated right now. But like the reality is that many of these countries have now essentially chosen a side. They've been bought into that decision, but regardless, they have kind of chosen a side. So it's going to be very interesting to see if they can actually get a clean, airspace to do so. And what they actually send. Last time, as we've talked about at length, they telegraphed it extensively. It seems very much like it was a face-saving maneuver. They even had backroom discussions with Blinken of the State Department and the Biden administration. It seems very clear to me that they did not want to escalate things further. They just wanted to save face. This time around, I'm not so sure that that's actually what they want, and maybe that's why their neighboring countries are saying, we're not going to assist. We don't want to be in the line of sight when America responds, because let's be honest, this has very little to do with what the IDF is going to do in response. This has a lot to do with what they think America will do, and that sucks for us.
You kind of have seen that in general over the past decade or so with a lot of these surrounding countries in the Middle East who, for a very long time, they would cheer on and maybe even tacitly support a lot of the attacks on Israel that would happen. Yet they'd maybe stop short of actually committing to forces or whatever like that. But even more so, it seems like they're pussyfooting around a little bit. They don't want to end the conflict. They absolutely don't want to end the conflict. They want to support what's going on with the Palestinians. This is why Egypt is never going to open their borders, and just that would solve the entire thing, right? If Egypt just let a lot of people who are sitting there through into their border, but they don't want them either. So they're kind of just sitting there and playing a wait game because they don't want to piss off the United States. But they still want this conflict with Israel to be very much present. But they don't want to do anything bad enough to get smacked by us.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see them come to the kind of Arab world and specifically go to places like Iraq and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and essentially ask, hey, clear the airspace. We're going to do something here. And them saying, nope, that's not going to happen here. A few years ago, there was a big move made by China in the region as they were able to bring Saudi Arabia and Iran together. There's a lot of kind of sectarian violence between these two nations representing the Sunnis and Shiites, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit regarding Taylor Swift. We'll tell you how that ties in just a little bit. But before getting into that specific kind of topic, there was a point in time where the Chinese brought the Iranians and Saudi Arabians together up until the Hamas attacks, which changed that kind of situation, changed that larger alliance. And it definitely does look like the Middle East is largely divided on this. And Jordan, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia are saying, no, guys, stop it. Let's not retaliate here. We're not going to give you the airspace. We're not going to have a larger conflict here, with Iran saying, screw it, we're just going to do it anyway. As, of course, there's going to be other proxies and other countries like Syria that are probably going to be taking part in this, Hezbollah as well, and the Houthi rebels, who are going to be probably participating in some kind of unified action against Israel, potentially all at the same time together, trying to overwhelm Israel, that has responded and hinted at the possibility of using nuclear weapons as well as a kind of deterrent against any larger attacks that threaten its larger sovereignty. So, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, just again, just one step closer to World War III, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how Iran's like, hey, we're definitely going to respond in the next week. We're definitely going to respond. Okay.
Well, they said Monday. They were like, Monday. We're responding Monday. It's Wednesday.
Well, but by the end of the week, we promise it'll happen.
Yeah.
Maybe it will. Maybe it will. And we also, just like with this conflict, and kind of Russia's wrapped up in this too, because you were talking about, it looks like they were potentially targeting some of the natural gas pipelines and stuff in Russia right across the border. So much of this does come down to how does this affect the world market when it comes to energy. Obviously, Europe very concerned about natural gas when it's coming from Russia, despite what sanctions they tried to put in place.
And they're still buying Russian gas.
Exactly.
Or they're buying it through China as a proxy, or India as a proxy, and they're paying even more for it because now it has to be transported around into them. So that's another key important factor that you brought up here. They talk about all these sanctions and how bad Russia is, but they're still buying Russian energy, financing the Russian war machine against them that they're fighting.
100%, because what happens when their energy prices go up, those people stop getting elected. And we're going to have a similar thing play out here with whatever happens with this Iran conflict with petroleum prices.
Exactly.
And just one more reason the United States truly does need to actually go into energy independence. I'm not talking about a couple wind farms and all this crap. I'm talking about actually building new nuclear power plants.
Let's go.
And drill, baby, drill for the oil we have here.
So you're saying Kamala Harris's plan of banning fracking is not going to help all of us and help the environment and make the weather gooder? Huh?
No.
She's barely come back around on fracking. She used to be very anti-fracking. And
Well, that was one of our major positions in 2020, but it's probably a very unpopular one, especially with the potential of energy prices going through the roof. Because if these conflicts, expand more, not just in Europe, but also in the Middle East, this is going to have a huge, tremendous impact on our economy, on our way of life, on our cost of goods. As of course the price of energy goes up, everything else goes up with it as well. And not a lot of people realize it, as the neocons literally cheer on this conflict. But we need to really kind of bring back the point home. This is going to have tremendous impacts on the economy, which already is dealing with some very significant pressures.
I think that they do want energy independence is clutch for a country, but if the citizens are independent, that's dangerous for the government. So they don't want the citizens to have unlimited electricity, because then they can make unlimited destructive capability power. So like hydrogen fuel, nuclear batteries, localized nuclear fuel plants, things like that, they don't want to exist. So it's like they still want this limit, because if we open up the hydrogen system, we're just like churning graphene out of carbon dioxide and pumping thousands of tons of hydrogen fuel into the methane system to power our vehicles at like pennies on the dollar, like 8 cents a gallon or whatever. That would like almost ruin the government's plan of control of limiting growth. I don't know what their expectation is. They want to like keep humanity, because what will happen is growth is parabolic or exponential. So they're trying to stop it like about here with humanity. They don't want it to like eclipse that uncontrollable overgrowth. I I mean, nuclear power is good because you can't those power plants can't be moved around. They just sit there, and if they want to cut off the electrical wiring to your house, you can't get it anymore. So there's still that control mechanism, but
unless you have your own personal generator, that's always going to be an issue, right? I mean, you still get whatever the origin of the energy source. You still have wires that come through the state because the state has granted monopolies in almost every district to the to the utility companies. So like you're always at the mercy of the state unless you have your own generator on site.
Yeah, regardless whether we're talking about natural gas, coal, nuclear power, hydroelectric, all that stuff, wind, solar, same way. I obviously I worked in the nuclear field, so I have a little bit of a bias towards nuclear energy, but the problem is it's a fight from both sides. You have a traditional big oil or big natural gas, like whatever, all these companies who want to keep the status quo for energy. And then on the other side, you have environmentalists who are alarmists about the dangers of nuclear power. So you're kind of fighting a tough battle there when it does come to it. But
I say it's three sides because you got to also include the green energy companies. I mean, there's major money in that.
And
too.
the Chinese that are providing a lot of the resources for the solar panels that, of course, they're trying to get everyone to use that they don't use themselves. Of course, China doesn't use all this renewable green energy.
They're like, give us that coal, bro.
They're like, we'll make sure our factories are up and running. You guys could have the little solar panels and the little wind turbines there. Good luck with that, guys. That worked out well for Texas.
It's crazy how like much of an advantage we're just giving China because we're idiots. Like it's
I don't
really
think we're
remarkable.
idiots. I think it's a planned kind of
Maybe.
deal. As of course, a lot of Western elites have been doing more and more business with the Chinese, and China definitely does look like the playground for the globalists, where they kind of genetically engineer certain stuff, and they do certain experiments, and they don't have to face certain regulations, and they're able to, of course, do whatever they want, all under the guise of
But keep in mind though,
there.
they did. Yeah, you're right. There may be plans from the top level that's actually more intelligent, and they're doing this for a reason. But the indoctrination program to convince the population that like having your utilities cost 3-4x what they would if you had a free market and energy, and the fact that you have people that will literally protest and throw oil at priceless paintings and like historical artifacts just because they're so convinced. It's amazingly powerful.
Those stop oil people are sociopaths. They're absolutely insane, crazy human beings, not just because of their behavior, but if we implemented the policy that they want us to implement and we stopped all oil, the economy would just absolutely stall. The poorest people in the world would be absolutely screwed over. Energy costs would go through the frickin' roof, and green energy isn't able to sustain the larger kind of economy that we're all dealing with. But I kind of want to ask you this specifically, Ryan, because it does seem like nuclear is the answer to a lot of this. You see Germany literally shooting themselves in the foot, getting rid of nuclear reactors. France is doubling down and building as many nuclear reactors as they can. It definitely does look like it's actually a clean form of energy that could sustain the larger kind of economic growth that everyone wants.
It absolutely is like it should be a massive part of the solution going forward. It's incredibly difficult to get permits to get one built. A lot of the ones we do have here in the United States are aging and in need of being retrofitted and things like that. You're always going to have to overcome the stigma, which is that it's dangerous, right? That it could be really, really bad. However, if you actually look at the data, if you actually look at the amount of death or injury across all types of energy production per megawatt produced, nuclear power is the safest by far. Because even when you have like the wind turbine stuff, even when you have the solar panels and the battery banks that are needed when you do have solar energy or wind energy, you've got to mine for lithium, you've got to build all this equipment, all the things for the wind turbines themselves. It ends up there's more deaths in producing a megawatt of wind energy than there ever is in nuclear power.
Well, and then add to that all of the deaths that come from the military-industrial complexes. There's fights over oil and gas resources.
Yeah.
It's like there's catastrophic consequences from going away from nuclear power. But most people in America they can't connect those dots and realize like we don't need to be doing this. We could actually just become totally energy independent in a way that's way safer than any of these other sources. It's nuts that we're not doing it, but that's the propaganda.
The fear of the term nuclear from radiation, but like there's fusion there's fission, completely different processes. They're both called nuclear power, which I think is a problem. We should be real specific about, because fusion doesn't melt anything down. It just stops working if it's not working. Fission, if it goes into meltdown, can get really, really hot because it doesn't have any water to cool it down. And then it can melt its own container and go into the earth and then
Stay hot
toxify the earth, the
forever.
corium.
Yeah.
You got to go fish it out with like cooling it down with like a superconductor like gold or something. You got to pour into the corium to let it harden slowly over time if you can extract it.
And there's so many different ways to build plants too, in terms of people having either negative or positive coefficient of reactivity, which can be much inherently safer or more dangerous, depending on which you choose. And at the end of the day, we get reminded of these couple obviously Chernobyl gets brought up, 3 Mile Island gets brought up, Fukushima gets brought up. At the end of the day, look at all the reactors that are operating, including for a lot of these people, especially say in California. I would imagine a lot of people in San Diego and that area would be like, man, I don't really want a nuclear reactor built in my backyard. Well, guess what? You have 10 of them at any point in time sitting right off the pier, right? Same thing in Norfolk, Virginia, right? Wherever we have nuclear-powered subs or aircraft carriers, they're literally sitting there right on the edge of these towns, of these cities. People probably have no idea. They don't even think about it. Because why? Because at least the United States Navy has never, ever had a nuclear power accident. You know, they've been safe. For 60 years.
Have you looked into thorium reactors? Did you guys study those at all?
I was not experienced with that at all, but I've heard people talk about them, and I've seen like some of the new research that people are talking about, how they could be like so much safer, more efficient.
Yeah,
and
they
stuff.
don't melt down from what I've heard, and they create breeder reactors where you put the thorium in the breeder reactor and it produces more thorium that you can then make another reactor with, and just these reactors just make more. I think that's really the way. That might really be the way forward. But then you got to you got to change your fuel economy too. There's energy production, and then there's fuel. Fuel is very specific because it can be transported around a container. And you've got hydrogen, carbon, and plutonium are the only three types of fuel.
And at the end of the day, the only thing you're really talking about that's not green about nuclear energy is just the spent fuel. Like that's it, right? So you gotta bury it in Yucca Mountain or whatever. And we can do that for a long, long, long time. Or I think we should just, just dump that crap in the ocean. I don't care.
It can be recycled. I talked to a scientist. I interviewed
It can be,
Yekezko
yeah.
Moskowitz.
Yeah, we can make Ninja Turtles out of them.
A lot of potential to recycle that stuff.
Quick question for you, Ian, because that seems to me that would violate Einstein's theory of, I think it's like energy conservation. How could you possibly have a thorium reactor that produces more thorium to create more reactors? Doesn't that violate that principle?
Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only altered in form.
But it sounds as if he's saying it could be
The assumption
created.
with that, where they're like, you can't get more energy out of the system you put into it, is there are no closed systems in reality. People want to say like, this cup is a closed system. All right, for the purposes of three-dimensional matter, yeah, maybe. But when you're talking about electrons, they pass through. There are no walls to the universe.
Okay, you nerds. You guys are going over
Yeah, I was
everyone's
going to
heads
say,
here.
I don't know exactly the specifics when it comes to thorium, but
Nor do I, I'll be honest.
Obviously, when something does go through we'll stop nerding out in 30 seconds, I swear. When something undergoes a transformation or a fission, right, it can produce other products, but also like that uranium, if it's a certain isotope, could change into another type of uranium that may or may not be usable. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there has to be degradation, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. So different isotopes of uranium are going to be liable to fission and other ones will not. But if you add a neutron to that, it will become unstable, so it's usable for fission. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, specifically,
Steph,
to
really
answer
good.
your question,
We got to move on because we got a bunch of other stuff.
Let me finish
You
this
said
off.
30 seconds. You said 30 seconds of nerd
This
talk.
is the
Well, we
thorium
can
breeding
continue this
reactor.
talk.
What it
Gosh
is
darn it.
let me cap it off so we can end
2
this
seconds.
like professionals
2 seconds.
here.
Let's go.
It takes thorium-232 and it converts it into uranium-233.
Okay, yeah.
And that's the breed. That's what it's breeding.
Okay.
Is uranium.
Got it. Steph, we got a bunch of super chats. Read the one on the screen from YouTube right now. Lone Wolf.
Lone Wolf 36 says radiation decay energy, nuclear as you say, still produces significant waste. Thousands of years pass before it is safe. We stuff it into barrels in the ground. I'm with you, but let's be honest.
All right, let's continue. Read the next one. Let's keep going up on YouTube.
Daniel Bennett says Ripple/XRP token won their lawsuit against the SEC today.
SEC
the
today.
SEC.
Yep.
Well, I didn't even know they were
Keep
in a
going.
lawsuit.
Why don't we just hire Elon Musk to throw the waste into outer space? Go ahead. Sorry.
There you go.
Agreed.
We
Yeah.
can just put it in a volcano. Eric Heffelfinger says 199 represent Hail RKKK Outpost.
Thank you.
Maybe you shouldn't have read that one.
Sorry, guys.
It was just a typo, I
Red
think.
Viking says use overview cam more. Dun, 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 dun. Steph is a decor master. That's all Luke. Luke loves that interior designing. All right, I'm not your buddy guy says even ISIS knows she works for the CIA.
As he's talking about Taylor Swift, which we're going to be talking about right now. As of
Well,
course,
that's funny because they both do. Go
yeah,
ahead.
that's the argument that I made and was hinting at during the kind of tease for this larger podcast, as it's spy versus spy, CIA versus CIA, as we have the breaking news that Taylor Swift just had to cancel 3 of her concerts in Austria because of a terror threat by ISIS. This as 2 suspects were arrested with 3 other suspects at large, a part of an ISIS plot to attack the concert where thousands of Taylor Swift fans were gathering in Austria. As it's also important to note here that a lot of civil unrest in the United K was sparked off during a Taylor Swift dance event where an individual came in there, and again, we got to be safe here because we're on YouTube, and took the lives of 3 young children, which sparked off the larger race riots that we're seeing unfolding there and continuing there today. Now, this is the kind of lead story. This is the kind of major story of what we're talking about here, as of course, a lot of people assume that Taylor Swift is kind of involved in like CIA psyopses. Again, it's unconfirmed. ISIS, though, let's just be honest here, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for George W. Bush and Barack Obama that essentially created all the ingredients for them to fester and grow inside of Iraq, inside of Syria, as they also got a lot of U.S. American taxpayer dollars in order to fight Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian government, which allowed them to become as prominent and as a powerful force as they are. They are the leading force of global terrorism, and very interestingly, Iran was one of their major kind of opponents, as they represent the larger Sunni-Shiite kind of divide, as it looks like ISIS is still active. A lot of people already say that they have all the hallmarkers of working for the intelligence agencies, just like the Mujahideen in the 1980s. And to me, this does kind of bring up larger questions if these attacks could potentially be legitimate or they could be engineered in order to spur off more racial tensions inside of Europe. That's automatically what I'm thinking about myself, looking into this particular story, as of course a similar event unfolded in the United Kingdom that sparked off race riots just a few days ago that are still continuing there. What do you guys think?
The first thing I thought as I was reading this as you were talking is, oh, how convenient. It's a Muslim terror threat. Perfect timing to get us to go to war with the Muslim country of Iran.
Yep.
Too bad. Wow.
Well, there's different kind of Muslims. ISIS represents the Sunnis. Iran represents the Shiites.
You know the American people don't care.
Most normies don't get it. They hear Islam and they think Islam, but you're right.
Yeah, but they're the biggest kind of opponents against each other. And if you look at the country that essentially stopped ISIS, it was Iran. It was Syria. It was Russia that went after ISIS.
Yep.
And these are the kind of global jihadists that go to the Western world and commit horrible acts of terror that they were just plotting at a Taylor Swift event, which is a major deal. And I think she represents a larger kind of Western cultural icon that a lot of Islamists don't like, and they see as haram, and they see as being immoral. And I think this story has a lot more to it than just some crazy guys trying to do something during this concert.
Based off of the history that you just laid out, which I agreed with, this is why you ought to really be asking deep questions about that Crocus concert hall attack that happened a few months ago inside of Russia, because that was allegedly ISIS, right? But then they caught those guys fleeing to Ukraine. Where is Ukraine getting its funding? Well, the U.S. State Department and your tax dollars. And where are they getting their weapons? Oh, that's also from America. And I don't know, guys. I'm just saying. I would not be surprised. This is a problem, though, because there are actually radical terrorist groups that have values that are very in opposition to my belief set, obviously, and do terrible things of their own accord. But when you have the U.S. State Department funding these organizations for years, sometimes decades, you can't distinguish between them just being lunatics and them doing something at the behest of our own government. And that's why you should never fund terrorist organizations, America. I don't know why I even have to say that. It's so obvious, but we've been doing it for like 20 plus years now.
We just did it a couple days ago. There's a news report coming in that the United States just, accidentally was giving money to the Taliban inside of Afghanistan, according to all the grants that they were giving. And accidentally, there was a bunch of grants just recently given to the Taliban.
Just an accident, though, Luke. It's just totally an accident.
Sorry, Ryan, we cut you off.
No, that's fine. Well, other than all the other equipment and stuff we left for the Taliban there in Afghanistan, that was nice of us to leave it there in such great shape. But it goes beyond just 20 years because you look at South America and the different parties or guerrilla groups or stuff like that we funded during the Cold War to fight the spread of communism. And a lot of these things that we do fund, 10 years, 15 years later, all of a sudden, they might not be very predisposed to have values or do the things we want them to do after we've already given them this kickstart to become a massive organization. But when it does come to Europe, I do think that tensions are incredibly high right now. We've seen the past decade, more and more people have been speaking out about the migrant problem that does exist in Europe, especially with these countries, because it's not, for Americans, I think it's maybe hard to understand sometimes because we truly are more of a melting pot than really any other country around the world. And I kind of hate that term, but just that's kind of what it is. Whereas when you go to the UK, when you go to a place like Austria, when you go to these places 20 years ago, they're kind of 95% English, 95% Austrian, and all of a sudden you start dumping thousands and thousands and thousands of migrants in there.
Millions.
At this point, millions in some of these countries have absorbed. That is not something that is very easy to do, and it's going to come with a lot of problems, and we've seen that. And you have to hand out pamphlets asking, hey, do not R word since we're on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a problem. It's been a problem for a while.
And that R word problem keeps increasing, especially in all the places that they have open borders that they keep trying to fudge the statistics with and have been doing specifically in Europe. And again, we're going to be talking about what's happening in England on the next platform because it is kind of a more spicier topic than the one that we could actually discuss here.
YouTube professional right here. R word, baby.
Yeah. That's true. That is probably the gayest thing you can say is like you have to censor it that way, but that's okay. All right.
He means it in a happy way.
I do for YouTube.
We've got the R word,
family
F
friendly,
word,
Disney
and the N
approved.
word. What if we can make a word for every letter and total? The censorship will be complete when we have 26 words that must be spoken of by their first letter.
I can't think of anything for N though. It's weird.
Yeah, ends up
Nancy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes, Nancy.
I have another word.
Oh, you do?
But
Luke, I can't believe you would even think that. You deserve to be banned.
It's too close to the algorithm. I was going to make the joke by not saying the word, by saying another word closely. So I can't even do it.
Don't do it.
I'm not doing it.
It's not worth the risk.
We're not doing it. We'll say it on the next platform when we're going to be going over there in a little bit. But to me, a lot of this automatically, I'm kind of thinking about Operation Gladio. And it wouldn't surprise me if there still is some kind of element of intelligence agency control when it comes to spurring on a lot of these kind of larger conflicts, a lot of these larger fights, a lot of these kind of clash of civilization type of moments where we are seeing people at odds with each other. And I really do believe the news with Taylor Swift is more significant than we're making it out to be. There's still suspects at large here. There could still be a larger incident here. And we're just a few incidences away from full martial law. We're a few incidences away from just civil strife and conflict internally in the Western world with factions of people fighting each other based off their identity. And that to me is extremely dangerous and something that Central Powers would probably play up on in order to try to escalate, in my opinion, to create more chaos and division in our society. That's my thinking. Am I too conspiratorial here? Ryan, what do you think?
I mean, I think with everything we've seen at this point, things that we know definitively, places like the CIA were involved in, it's hard to not ask that question, right?
Yeah.
We're just speculating. We're going based off our feelings and saying, could somebody want to engineer this type of conflict? And yeah, the possibility is absolutely there, especially with a lot of the things that people thought were conspiracies that seem to have come true lately.
I told you so.
Yeah, exactly. Right, you've got the jar right over there. You've got the Alex Jones was right jar right over there behind you, Luke. So, but for me, I'm always going to be a little bit skeptical, and I think it's good to ask questions. but I can't make any kind of definitive statement if I think the CIA is actually involved in getting this Taylor Swift concert canceled.
It's impossible to kind of say because we don't have kind of bulletproof evidence. We don't have solid things to go on except for the history of them engineering a lot of these kind of larger incidences that were always used as ploys by the state to get more power and influence for themselves. Now, shifting focuses here just a little bit, but also talking about the larger kind of social divide, we have the latest in this year's election, as it looks like Donald Trump soon will be speaking to Elon Musk on Twitter in just a few days from now, as of course Donald Trump is trying to up his social media game. He was just on Aiden Ross's live stream, and it looks like he's fighting an uphill battle against the legacy media that, according to new AI studies, proves have a deliberate kind of twist towards supporting Kamala Harris and, quote, pumping her up. As an AI study looked at 130,000 headlines from 550 news outlets, and it's highlighting how Kamala is getting way more positive coverage than Donald Trump. Now, of course, this doesn't surprise me, as of course the kind of legacy media has a lot of tentacles in it from the establishment, from the intel agencies that pull a lot of the strings within it. And for this article, pretty much, it could essentially say the sky is blue. The corporate media is in favor of Kamala Harris, not in favor of Donald Trump here, as the poll numbers are also very fascinating in this upcoming kind of election, as we have articles like this from The Guardian that are not trying to hide their bias at all, as this article reads, "Let's kick ass. Hollywood celebrities share their support of Tom Walls, who literally is an open socialist." This is not journalism. This is PR for the Democratic Party establishment. We do see some of it on the right, but overwhelmingly, I think it's fair to say, the legacy media, the corporate media, is trying to get Kamala Harris elected.
This is why I don't use left and right terms, and basically this is because there is a organized machine of administration that is pushing Kamala Harris, and it is not two-sided in any way. It is 98% of the behind-the-scenes activity, militarily, economically, on the earth, in the liberal economic order. That is the weight of force behind this thing. So I don't in any way see Trump. I see him at like 2 to 6% of the affluent power that Kamala wields the other 94% of. And it's just that industry, that political economic industry is so powerful. The British Empire, it's basically the vestiges of the British Empire. It's nothing. Maybe the left and the right are Russia, BRICS, and the liberal economic order, but even that's just totally this liberal economic nuclear powered order is like so powerful.
I still think there's value in using left and right, but in this case, I think you're right in that it is basically, it's a socialist communism and a fascism all kind of rolled into one. It's like the worst political ideologies ever concocted by man, just bundled up and then foisted upon the American people. And unfortunately, about half of them think it's great. And I don't know how you change that. But yeah, it is left and right. It is both.
I think over the last several years, we've kind of seen a little bit of shift from traditional left and right talking points to shift a little towards establishment versus anti-establishment, which is how we kind of end up sometimes agreeing with random people that have political thoughts we would never think we'd agree with, but on a specific thing, an authoritarian thing, you might find yourself in line with them. But when it comes to the study in question about the legacy media, what's the headline? Back to business as usual. Like, I think the only reason this is a headline now is because the legacy media seemed in the tank with the Democratic establishment to help force Joe Biden out. So Joe Biden for the past 2 months was not getting the favorable coverage that he was for the first 3 years of his presidency. They helped in ousting him. And now that they've got their other person here, and I think Kamala's a joke, but you're able to distance yourself a little bit from some of the failures of the president, even though you're right there as vice president. You're able to shield yourself from some criticism by being not white and by being a woman. So you're seeing maybe some punches being pulled by some people who are afraid to get called racist or sexist or whatever it may be. And so it's not a surprise the media is so hard right now for Kamala.
Yeah, and her VP pick, as of course who she picked, is being just openly celebrated by media organizations like MSNBC that have this opinion piece that reads, "I didn't vote for Tim Walz originally. Now I'm completely Walz-pilled." Again, this is not journalism. This is essentially the corporate media doing fellatio for the Democratic Party establishment for all of us to see and be utterly disgusted by. Now, there's some very interesting kind of commentary happening specifically about Tim Walz and allegations of stolen valor. I don't know if you were able to kind of look at that, issue yourself, Ryan, but I've been seeing the kind of talking points on social media picking up steam.
Luke, I want you to answer that, but would you mind doing me a favor and search on MSNBC for J.D. Vance's name? I want to see what the top headlines are for him, because I think it'll be hilarious to see the juxtaposition. Sorry, go ahead.
And just to point out, that was an opinion.
I said that
article.
stuff.
Yeah.
When it comes to Tim Walz, there have been allegations. There's been a couple things. One, he was National Guard, and apparently, he did over 20 years in the National Guard. And when they got the notification that his unit was about to be deployed, he suddenly, decided that was a good time for him to retire. Which, if any of us are in that position, maybe I've done 24 years of service or whatever, and I didn't really want to go on a 2-year deployment. I said, this is my time to go. Maybe that's the case. But there's been a lot of heat on him for basically being the leader of this command and being the leader at this command in terms of enlisted leaders, and him bailing on all his people before they actually go and see combat, which I've never seen combat. I was lucky I never even have to be deployed during my 11 years in the United States Navy, which is happenstance and crazy, and I'm thankful that I never had to go. But for all those other people that were there, what kind of a leader do you feel like that is who let you down? So that's one of the criticisms. The other thing is that we're now hearing that he's going around calling himself the Command Master Sergeant, which I believe, I'm Navy, but I believe for National Guard, that'd be the highest enlisted rank, E9. What it sounds like is he basically qualified for the promotion. He got told he was going to get the promotion, but because he did quit, because he retired, because he left early, he never fulfilled the requirements to actually put on that rank and be called it. So he retired. From what I can understand, from what we've seen from the Minnesota National Guard, the releases, they had to correct his record, make sure it said E8 instead of E9. But he's still gone around and campaigned using that title of Command Master Sergeant, which...
So, it's the same thing Biden did. They lied, But look...
Hillary Clinton was under sniper fire in Europe. Again, all a lie.
Yeah. Well, here's the bigger issue.
And Clint, just really quick, just to answer your question, because I did go on MSNBC and I looked up J.D. Vance, and all the articles are about his comment about childless cat ladies. All of them. The first article, the second article, and then the fifth and the sixth article. Childless cat lady, dig. And again, I must be psychic about that.
I must be psychic, Luke. How could I have guessed that they would have had a glowing, softball piece for Walz and then just brutal nonsense for JD Vance?
How did you know?
To be fair, childless cat ladies are one of the prime contributors. That is their demographic right there. Of course.
Oh yeah.
So of course they're going to defend their own honor.
But here's what people ought to be concerned with Walz. Actually, I think you just had the clip pulled up. You want to play it where it's a 7-second clip? Yeah, that one right there.
Yeah, we're going to play it right now.
Okay.
And especially around I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Yeah, that's a communist. He's an admitted socialist, and again, Elon Musk called it as well. He said Kamala is quite literally a communist. She wants not merely equal opportunity, but equal outcomes, which is absolutely crazy. Sorry, Clint, go ahead.
No, this is the point I was trying to make, is that I understand tactically to try and get the military veteran community to not support the Democrats. They ought to not already, but if you have to get some of them by pushing the stolen valor story, okay, fine. Here's why you shouldn't support him. He doesn't believe in free speech. He doesn't believe in gun rights. He allowed his town to be burnt down in the summer of 2020.
Fun rights, YouTube.
Sorry.
Did you see that clip of his wife talking about how we left the windows open so we could smell the tires burning? So we knew what was going on and we could feel the true
these
impact.
People are lunatics. The stolen valor story to me is wow, we need to even go there. Just point out the fact that the dude's a communist, and that should be enough for people to go I don't want to live in a communist country. Apparently, we have to also just talk about that. I got to point this out because I saw one of the most liked tweets I've seen in months from AOC, and it's just JD Vance sitting with his legs akimbo, like I'm sitting right now. And she goes, why are you sitting like that?
Man-spreading.
And it had 250,000 likes on Twitter. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. We are back in high school, but the cool kids are basically demonizing the nerds, but the nerds are actually the people that don't want to put me in a gulag. And I'm like, I can't believe this is where our political rhetoric has degraded to. That like we're just talking about, like, they're weird. No, you're communists. I don't care how weird JD Vance is. You're actual communists. This is so crazy that that actually works with people.
By the way, JD Vance is not that weird.
We got to move over to the next platform. Steph, read the last super chat, starting from Telegram, going from the bottom to the up, please.
Okay, we have Dayton's saying if Ian cuts his hair, people would listen to him more.
Oh, that's not a question.
Keep going.
Oh, no, you're right.
Nightmare says, Ryan, get Ian on FNT. It'll be hilarious.
We were just talking about that before the show a little bit. Friday Night Tights. Well, I'm inspired to talk about video. You guys do a lot of movies and TV, which I am not involved in. Right now, I've just totally almost ostracized myself from that bizarre community of DEI.
I hear you, dude. It's gone downhill. Hollywood's gone really downhill.
It's rough, but I'm an actor by trade, so I'm constantly fascinated with good performances and watching the ebb and flow and evolution of that system. But video games is where it's at. So they mentioned that another show is more video game focused.
Yeah, I'm part of Geeks and Gamers as well. So Geeks and Gamers and Friday Night Tights over on Nerdrotics channel. Yeah, we talk a lot of games, entertainment news, pop culture, stuff like that.
Even though DEI has taken over Hollywood, I still think that like if you're patient, because there's so many different production companies and so many streaming platforms, I think there's an argument to be made, and you could disagree if you like. I'm actually curious your opinion, that this may be the heyday of television in a certain regard, in terms of the quality of series that get put out if you're willing to go search and find them.
To make that kind of a short answer so we can get through super chats, I actually think that the explosion of streaming platforms with all these different companies trying to get in on streaming wars and ordering up all these original series, like there were more series made in like 2022 than in history.
Yes.
And as a result, I think you're actually spreading all the actual talented people incredibly thin, and you end up with a lot of childless cat ladies in the writing room.
That's a fair
and so I think we were actually getting some of the worst content we've ever seen in movies and TV.
Those childish cat ladies are responsible for all of it. Steph, read the last two ones, and we'll continue the conversation on the next platform.
We got T-Dog saying, if Trump gets in, we can organize a prisoner swap. 20 million based Brits for 20 million of your illegals. We will make the tea.
Okay, that's an interesting idea. And another one?
I dig it.
King of Biltong says,
No, underneath it.
Ryan's gay hair. Says, Ryan, you're gay.
Thank you.
We got another one by Dom H saying, yo, Ryan. So there's probably a lot of crossover from our
There's also
audience
a gay
to
sign
your
behind
audience.
you. That
and then we'll read King of Biltong's chat on the next platform, as of course we are going there right now and continuing the conversation in a totally free, uncensored way, which I am very excited about. As of course the platform that we are going on is the one that I am pulling up on my screen right now. And you guys will, of course, be able to find us on this particular platform right now, where the conversation continues for another hour. Before going over there, as we leave our kind of technocratic gulag, Ryan, where can people find out more information about you before we make the switch over?
Well, thanks for having me on the YouTube side. You can find me at Ryan Kinnell RK Outpost. That's my YouTube channel. I also work with Geeks and Gamers, another YouTube channel, and you can catch me every Friday evening on a show called Friday Night Tights on Nerdrotics channel.
Liberty Lockdown is the show. New episode dropping at 10 p.m. tonight. And I do Terror Gang at Liberty Lockpod on X, Liberty Lockdown on Instagram. Clint Russell's the name. We're out of here. Next platform.
Ian Crossland. Yeah, I'm pumped for this next platform as well. Follow me at Ian Crossland. You'll get a taste of everything. And hydrate. I let myself get a little dehydrated the last few days, so I've been snotty. But drink that water.
Or eat your water with watermelons. That's what I do. This is Steph We Are Change. You can find me on Instagram at Steph We Are Change or on X at Steph WRC.
All right, we got a lot to talk about, especially when it comes to what's happening in the United Kingdom right now, especially with allegations from a prison in the Middle East, crazy videos. Again, not family-friendly portion coming up right now. We, of course, always are looking for new callers. We got a caller who called in before, but if you want to be the caller, you never called in before, go right now to lookunfiltered.com. go to the Telegram channel, and we, of course, will be talking to you in just a few minutes from now and calling and getting your questions that are totally unscripted. See you there on